What is a bug?
Small creature, insect.
Cool, insect. All right, next question. What is a bug in regards to computer programming?
An error.
It's an error in your code. Okay. Who creates bugs? What creates bugs? We are the bug. We are the bug. We are the problem. We're also the solution. So, hey, there's a silver lining there. So the big thing is knowing what the most common bugs you'll run into when learning programming. As soon as you get very comfortable and programming makes sense, the bugs you hit are harder. But by that point, you know where to look. At the very beginning, you're introducing these bugs and error messages just aren't enough sometimes. So knowing what to read or what they are really helps you spot what went wrong. So let's look at, let's remember some common errors. So I'm connected to an HTML page here so we can simulate some of these errors in HTML and JavaScript. That's not what I was going for. 5501A. So we're going to look in here to see the bugs. Let's say I said var a equals hello. What kind of bug is that? It has a very specific name. It is a misspelling. But a misspell has a specific error name. Syntax error. Syntax error. You did something wrong. JavaScript doesn't understand what you're doing. It will give you a line number, right? It's in your app.js file, line 12. We come to our line 12 of our app.js file, and hopefully that gives us enough to search that line over and over again, or the surrounding lines, and figure out what's going on. Okay, so syntax error. This is a predefined error in JavaScript. If you have bad syntax, it will yell at you. What about this? Console.log. Joe. Don't look at this. What kind of error is this? It's undefined. What's undefined? Joe, right? It's not in quotes. It's not a string. It's a variable, but it's not pointing to something. So what kind of error is this? Reference error. The thing you are referring to doesn't exist. That is a reference error. There's one more. Syntax error, reference error. I mean, these are really the two big ones that you're going to run into. Something's undefined or something's spelled wrong. Yeah, actually, these are what you're going to run into the most. This is when you're learning programming. These two errors will plague you. So it's knowing immediately when you jump into any file, especially if it's somebody else's file and you're meant to fix it, where is the very first place you should be looking? Syntax, but what would be the best indicator? Let's say you get a file from somebody that's 200 lines long, it's JavaScript, and they're like, there's bugs in this, I don't know what's wrong. Red lines. Red lines, that would still take you scanning through the whole document. So what's going to tell you right away? Look at this line number. Debugging console. Always jump into the console, yeah. The console will let you know, you don't need to scan every line, look directly here, that's your first bug. So I'll go in and fix this one. So notice it's saying your first error is on line 12, great, I'll fix that. And then the next error, it's on line 15. Great, I'll fix that. I meant the string, Joe. And now we're fine. Are these errors the same when you're using Node instead of HTML? What does that mean? Well, let's run this file in Node instead of the document here. So how do I run this JavaScript file using Node? Node app.js. This does not look as pretty as the HTML document, does it? But do we see something we can identify in here? It's still a syntax error. Where is it telling us to look? Right above here, it actually gives us the text and then gives us the line number. Sometimes it won't be right here, sometimes it will be right here, sometimes it will be like 3 or 4 down, but notice most of these are not files we wrote. So you just kind of scan through this. You're like, wait, that's a file I wrote, and go check the line number it gave you. But typically, if the error is straightforward, it's not some like crazy something that went wrong with the code you're using, it'll be right here. And so the same thing applies when I fix this one, then run the file again. Now I get a reference error. Joe is not defined, right here at line 15. So any questions on those two error types? I swear there was one more. What was it?
Logic error?
Logic error. I mean, I'm sure we make plenty of those.
Isn't the same if you misspell like a function or something? Like
I believe that's syntax error, but let's try it out and make sure. Function, hello. Yep, syntax error.
Runtime errors?
Runtime errors. It won't be like a specific error type, but it will be an error thrown at runtime. Let's try to find this. Syntax error. Other than your console, what are your go-to resources when you hit a bug and your console's not giving you enough info? You could use sources and step through it. We'll try that in a minute. What resources outside of your HTML page or node would you look at?
Google?
Google, Stack Overflow, W3 Schools. That's why they're there. It's because there's no way you're going to memorize all this even after years and years. There are always new things. There are always new bugs. We need something like Stack Overflow or Google to point those out to us. What would happen? This is kind of a different thing, but what would happen if I ran this in Node right now? What kind of error are we going to get? Or is it going to console log or HTML page? We are linked to the HTML page, right? So we should have that document object. But when I run Node, it's a reference error. Document is not defined. Why?
Because you're in JavaScript.
The Chrome browsers run in JavaScript, Nodes run in JavaScript, but how come Node JavaScript doesn't know what browser JavaScript is? No, if we were instead of running this in Node, if I opened up my web window here and looked at this console log, there it is. But this one doesn't work.
no, it doesn't render the HTML.
Node doesn't render HTML. It is a JavaScript engine. It doesn't know HTML. It doesn't know CSS. So when you're running code in here, it's running the same JavaScript engine Chrome has, but without HTML or CSS plugged into it. It doesn't know what it is. That's why you're using Node for like readline sync to make your RPG. There is no HTML, CSS in that. It's all program based or all programming. This is what's cool about Node. Before Node, everything you wrote had to be here in the document for it to work. But now with Node, we can also run it locally like a little JavaScript engine. Okay, that's good. Double check the recap here, and if we're good with that. Let's look at breakpoints for a minute. They can be very helpful, though I feared away from them for the first couple months because I thought it just looked way too complex. And I'm like, I could do the same thing with the console log, which is true. If you put console logs at the right space, it'll give you the same thing as sources most of the time. But there's something elegant about sources. So let's write a simple function called loop through array. It takes an array and does a for loop through it. And just console.logs the array at the current index. We'll call our function with this array in it. And there we go. Okay, so I want to walk through this function. I want to see every iteration, because how many times is this for loop running? 6 times currently, because there's 6 items in the array. The length is 6, so while 0 is less than 6, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it runs 6 times. In sources, we would like to see each iteration broken down. So when you open up sources, and you can do this on any web page, if it's using a library like React, sources is not the best go-to, but plain vanilla JavaScript, I click on the app.js file, and here's our file, right? This is what we're working on. It's in the sources tab. Now I can click on any of these line numbers and set something called a breakpoint where the page will pause and let me see the code at that moment in time and let me resume until it hits that line again. So this is the one let's pause here. Let's also pause here. Now when I refresh the page, it's gonna run this code, but notice didn't stop. It looks like it's eternally loading my file. It's because I've told the JavaScript to pause before you're done. So the document's still loading. But in here, I can now hover over different items and see what they are at this moment in time. So I is currently undefined. Oh, because it's declaring it right now. The array length is 6, and I++. So I can click step over, and it'll go to the next piece. Now I should be defined, I believe.
Really?
Yep, now it's 0. So it stopped here, step to the next piece of the function. Now it's gone down to this line.
Step over, stay with the same line, and just go to the next.
It does on for loops because the for loop has multiple parts in it. That's kind of a special case. Usually it's going to do line by line by line. It looks like it's kind of breaking these down into individual calls, which is kind of cool. This is what's nice about it. You can, at this moment in time, what is array bracket I? It's 1. That's right, that is the first item. But if I step to the next line through, and now I look at array bracket I, it will be 2 or 3. Now it's 2. What's that?
Where does it say the number?
Right here. It's kind of hard to see, but why when I hover over it? So I can hover over array to get the whole thing, but if I highlight the whole thing and then hover, it'll let me know the value of that variable. And that's nice. When you have something running a bunch of times, maybe you have a for loop that's running 100 times in the first 90 times, it's fine, but something's breaking in a later iteration. You can find it in here. You can see what variables are at this point. I can, again, hover over I and see it's currently 1. And notice what it's highlighting. It shows you how the for loop runs. How many times did this expression get read? Once, only the first time. Every other iteration, it's incrementing it, making sure it hasn't hit the end. If it hasn't hit the end, it runs again. That was the last iteration. So one more time. But it kind of gives you a view, right? It increments the I variable. Have we hit the end? Nope. Console log. Increment. Have we hit the end? Console log.
It also has it on the side too.
Yeah, and over here it's giving you so very much. Scope. You know, what's our local scope? What's the scope within the function right now? The array. What is in the block scope? What's between these two brackets? It's the I variable. It's currently equal to 3. Lots of information. And I think that's why most of us, or a lot of us, steer away from this at the beginning. It's just so much info, but you do get used to it, and they tie together. This mechanism is actually pre-built into Node as well. If you ever click over here and you see these, you can use Node debug, and these are breakpoints. Very similar. We can just hover over your code in the middle of Node and get the similar effect as the console or sources window.
That's cool.
Yeah, Node debugger. So that's sources. I believe you've also gone over elements. See our HTML page, we can adjust their styles. Console for our JavaScript, sources for all files, but able to set breakpoints. Later on in the course, by the end of next week, we'll start getting into networky type things where we're making requests to things online and getting data from them. Network will keep track of all that. Say, hey, you requested from the Star Wars website all the character information. This is what you sent, the request you sent, this is the data that came back. It'll all be in here. And later we'll also get to application for storage. Right now, I would stick to these 3. We'll expand to network and application a bit later. And I've never actually used memory or performance. All right, so bugs on a plane. Let's look at it for a minute. It'll be good. And it's after lunch, so we'll probably need to take a break so we can recaffeinate or something. Bugs on a plane. I'm going to show you how to do this. How many of you have done a git clone before? All of you have, cool. Who can tell me what a git clone does? Yeah, saying, hey, folder on GitHub, I need that folder on my computer, clone it down. We get all the code. So I'm in this review folder, you'd be in your exercises folder, and you'll just copy these lines. Notice it's running 3 commands. It's cloning an assignment we have on our vSchool GitHub. It's then CDing into that folder that's been cloned down, and then it's removing the Git file, so it's no longer connected to GitHub. But you don't need to type this all manually. You can just copy, paste, hit enter, and now we're in bugs on a plane, so I'll say code, and it opens up.
Were you just in your assignments when you pasted that?
Yeah, you'd be using your assignments exercises directory inside of assignments, inside of exercises. All right, so what bugs on a plane is, do you remember travel form? Have you done travel form? Yeah, so it's kind of like travel form, right? Welcome to blah, blah airlines. And we want this effect where they put in all their information, they hit submit, and they get this alert window with all the data. So what is the first thing you do? You come into here, you open these files, you're like, cool, that's a lot of HTML. Yeah, it's a fair amount of HTML. Then you go to the JavaScript, and you're like, hey, that's a fair amount of JavaScript. That's a bit to consume, right? And then we see little squigglies, some weird stuff going on. Where would you look first? This is overwhelming. Console. Just trying to drill that in. Console. Yep. So it doesn't look like any errors are popping up in here. There's this 404 not found for fab icon. That's nothing. So let's test it out. Let's see if it works. Type in some stuff, some more stuff, and submit. Well, no alert window happened. Now I'll check this again, and there's still nothing happening. That's a really unhelpful thing. So what happens? If you're clicking, you're trying to interact, you have JavaScript, and nothing's happening, what is the culprit? Well, we could try this. Let's just see if our JavaScript's even running. Let's console.log, hello, and let this refresh. No hello. It's not even running this file. What does that mean? True.
Check the sources tab.
Yeah, you can check sources. And we're like, I see no files other than my index.html page. It doesn't even know about our JavaScript file. So we come to our HTML file and we scroll down, and sure enough, there's no script. Cool, now we can debug. And notice what we're getting now. Syntax error, unexpected token, line 7, app.js. And that's kind of the process that you would take on this assignment. Line by line, as soon as you fix the most current error in your code, you come back to the console, you see, all right, new error, new line number, come in and try to fix it. But what's hard about this assignment, or what can be hard about it, is it uses some syntax you may not be comfortable with or used to yet. For example, this right here, form.elements bracket age.value. You have used form.elements. You don't like it, but it's a perfectly fine way to do it, right? So age is the name given to the input somewhere, right here. So we could say form.age. Form also has a .elements. That's an object of all the things with names. So here's another way of saying it. This is totally fine syntax. This is not a bug. However, if you wanted to change it to something you're more comfortable with, like form.age.value, that'll also work. right? So it's not finding the things that look strange and fixing them. It's finding the things that are legitimately broken, like these brackets. And then coming in, all right, now we have a new error on line 14. So what's going on line 14? What could be the possible problem here?
It needs to be equal after the diet powder. That's calling a variable.
We're trying to read between the lines, right? Somebody else wrote this, and you're like, it's wrong. I have never seen var array.pop. All right, let's get rid of var. It doesn't look like we're trying to declare a variable, because where else am I doing something similar to this? The next two lines. So I'm looking at their other examples and like, this isn't consistent. So that doesn't look right. That looks a bit better, but that's a different error. But what data type is diet?
It's an object.
Oh.
Can you pop and push on objects?
No.
What should that object be?
Array.
Right, so this is, you really have to think through it before you change something. Don't, be sure that you're like, okay, I'm making this change because they're using 3 array methods here on an object. So this must need to be an array, not an object. Rather than trying to change all of these to something that would interact with an object. Cool. But these are really good. Getting someone else's code, trying to read, because we all write differently. It's, it's a language. There are conventions, so it's easy to read what someone else wrote, but it will never look the same exactly as yours. This is really good practice to have. So I would definitely consider doing this. There's maybe like 5 or 6 more errors in here you'd have to jump through before you could enter all this, hit submit, and see your alert. But just following this. Type error. That's the other one. We had syntax error, reference error, and type error. Type error. It's a very good definition of it. Type error object represents an error when a value is not of the expected type. And it's running it on that line there. Cool.
Line 4 needs to change.
Where at?
Well, airline form.
Line 1.
Our line form? Yeah.
Should that be in brackets?
Error.
Below that, the line to get element value should be.
Right? So a lot of these things you may not even need console to help you with. You may see them beforehand. This one I don't even think is doing anything, so just
ID.
Lowercase.
yeah, okay, you're getting it. Cool. Yes. What is your debugging process like right now? Is it pretty similar to this? You jump with the console, you're entering in console logs, or is it more of just like help?
Mine's more like help.
Yeah, help is a great way to start until you start getting used to the main error types and how to read those errors in the console. But if you come over and ask for help, I'm always welcome to help. But if I come over to help and the console's not open, that's typically the first thing I'll ask you to do. What does your console say? Mostly, the first couple times it'll be like, oh yeah, but then you'll do it. Check that console. Cool.